Alright, wrap up time for Emerging Zombies, this week's Much Abrew About Nothing. And this one, I'm not incredibly happy with how it went. So, it felt like our deck was decent at going wide. We had some clunkiness with the mana, not having our blue mana sometimes for other Deep Fiend, or just weird issues like that, but it felt like we were really good at going wide, but when we went wide, we were going wide with like 2/2s, and our opponent much of the time, was also good at going wide, but they're going wide with tireless trackers and Sylvan advocates and bouncing our stuff with reflector mages. So their going wide is just bigger than our going wide, and they could keep up a lot of the time as far as just the raw number of creatures on the battlefield. So when it came time to actually trying to win the game, their stuff was just bigger than ours and they would be able to kill us. So that was the main problem I noticed with the deck. It felt like we want to be grindy and go long, but our long game, the payoff just isn't there because we're just playing a whole bunch of 2/2s. On the other hand, in aggro matches, we're not quite fast enough to beat a really aggressive deck because their threats are just more efficient. We're playing 2/2s for 3 and 2/2s for 4, and our opponent's playing 2 power creatures for 1 mana, so we're not fast enough to beat aggro. I don't think we're good enough at grinding to win the grindy matchups. So that leaves the deck in a really weird spot where it's not good against a lot of things. A couple of specific problems. One is Liliana is definitely on the rise, even though it didn't show up a ton in our matches. And Crypt Breaker matches up amazingly poorly with Liliana. So I don't know if Crypt Breaker is playable right now. As a card, it is incredibly powerful. It can win games on its own. And if we're in a matchup where our opponent's not playing a Liliana, it can be absurd. But a lot of decks are playing Liliana, which makes playing Crypt Breaker really risky at the moment. Ideas for fixing the deck. First off, the numbers on Distended Mindbender and Elder Deep Fiend have got to be wrong. I think you need to have 4 Elder Deep Fiends and maybe 1 Distended Mindbender. And I think that could help with the problem where we get in these big board stalls, because we could theoretically cast an Elder Deep Fiend on our opponent's upkeep, tap down some of their creatures, untap, cast another Elder Deep Fiend, tap down. That's a total of 8 creatures, and then we can actually take advantage of going wide. But a lot of the time, we were getting Descended Mindbenders, and they were coming down relatively late and not doing that much. So I would definitely switch the numbers there. The other thing I would 100% want to fix is the sideboard. The sideboard felt really awkward as far as the removal. I think Cletus is fine. Slumgar, I guess there's probably some arguments for in control matchups. Negates, a key. What I didn't like was Deadweight and Flaying Tendrils. It felt like we'd run into Spell Queller decks and Sylvan Advocate decks, and our Deadweights and Flaying Tendrils just didn't kill anything. I'd want to bring in more removal to deal with those cards, but we just didn't have any options. So it feels a little weird to be relying on Deadweight and Flaying Tendrils, because we're not a Delirium deck. We don't really care about Delirium, so Deadweight being enchantment doesn't matter, so it would probably just be better as Ultimate Price or Grasp of Darkness. And Flaying Tendrils is this really awkward Nobo with our deck that's playing Relentless Dead and a bunch of creatures that make 2/2 tokens, and Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and Haunted Dead, which we want to go in the graveyard. So it's like the weirdest synergy. It's probably better just to play Languish there, because we would rather have our creatures die than get exiled with Flaying Tendrils. So it feels really awkward. And the other problem is, like Deadweight, it doesn't kill Sylvan Advocate, it doesn't kill Spell Queller. So both of those cards, I felt like in a lot of matchups, I'd want to bring in removal, and we just didn't have good options to bring in. So I would look at fixing that. Overall, though, I think the thing to do if you want to play this style of deck is to look at the Pro Tour Eldritch Moon decks, which are just coming out. There are people that are playing decks very similar to this. In fact, Zombies was the 4th most played deck on day 1 of Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. The difference is those decks figured out the way to break that huge board stall we were talking about, dropping things like Relentless Dead, I believe, and Crypt Breakers, and Jaces, and instead going all in on kind of this dredge package with Haunted Dead, Prized Amalgam, Stitchwing Scob as kind of a backup Haunted Dead. And then the big key piece is Voldaren Pariah, which not only can you madness by discarding it to like Haunted Dead, but what you do is you get back your Haunted Dead, get back all your prized amalgams, use those creatures to flip your Voldaren Pariah, kind of wrath your opponent's board, get a huge Voldaren Pariah, then you just discard a couple cards, get back your Haunted Dead, which gets back all your prized amalgams, and do it all over again. So in those builds, it feels like you are perfectly set up to win those long, grindy games. Not only do you have a huge evasive threat in Voldaren Pariah to actually attack and win, but you're wrathing your opponent's board, and it's kind of a one-sided wrath because all of your stuff just comes back from the graveyard. Plus, you can still play the Elder Deep Fiends for additional value because they're great ways to sack the Haunted Deads and prized amalgams to keep that chain going. So that's what I would look towards if I was going to keep playing this type of deck, is a more dredge zombie deck, like the ones from Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, getting rid of some of the slow, grindy early drops, and instead being able to kind of win the late game against anyone by this really powerful, efficient recursion package built around prized amalgam. Anyway, that's been Emerging Zombies, our Much Abrew About Nothing this week. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to vote for next week's deck by liking, subscribing, and commenting to Instant Deck Tech videos. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon.